Hi, welcome to today's On This Day in Tudor History with me, Claire Ridgway. Now, I've got my channel t-shirt on today. On this day in Tudor history, something bad happened because, unfortunately, like quite a lot of the days that I've encountered this year doing this, today something bad did actually happen. For on this day in Tudor history, the 2nd of November 1541, All Souls' Day, this day marked the beginning of the end for Queen Catherine Howard, King Henry VIII's fifth wife. Now, let me tell you more in a talk that's based on an article that I wrote for the Anne Boleyn Files back in 2017. Let me just tell you about why this marked the beginning of the end for that queen. Well, by All Souls' Day 1541, Catherine Howard, who was the niece of Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk, and the cousin of the late Queen Anne Boleyn. Well, she'd been queen for just 15 months. She'd married King Henry VIII on the 28th of July 1540, following the annulment of his 6-month marriage to Anne of Cleves. And Catherine and Henry appeared to be very happy. I mean, Catherine had restored the king's youth. She was young, she was vivacious. She'd brought sort of joy to his life. But little did either of them know that everything was about to change. They'd just been on a 4-month-long royal progress to the north and had just returned to Hampton Court Palace, returning on the 30th of October 1541. And although King James V of Scotland had caused King Henry VIII a little bit of upset by standing him up in York, not turning up to the meeting that had been arranged there, the progress had been successful in demonstrating King Henry VIII's authority to the north, which was a part of the country that had rebelled against him in late 1536 and early 1537. And this had been an opportunity for Henry to humiliate his northern subjects and demand displays of submission from them and for them to prove their loyalty to him. The king must have been fairly pleased with how this progress had gone, and he was also really pleased with his wife. On All Saints' Day, the 1st of November 1541, King Henry VIII had directed the Bishop of Lincoln at Mass to make prayer and give thanks with him for the good life he led and hoped to lead with her, with Catherine. However, his joy and his thankfulness was to be short-lived. For on the 2nd of November 1541, this day in history, as the king arrived for Mass in the Holy Day closet at Hampton Court Palace, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer gave him a letter. The Archbishop asked the king to read it in private, for it concerned a matter that he had not the heart to tell it by word of mouth. This letter outlined allegations that had been made by John Lascelles, brother of Mary Hall, who'd been a member of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk's household with Catherine Howard. Lascelles had advised his sister that she should sue for service with the Queen, i.e. that she should use her links with Catherine, the fact that she'd been with Catherine in the Dowager Duchess's household, to try and get appointed to Catherine's royal household. But Mary would not. She refused to do this. Of course, her brother wanted to know why, and she then told her brother things about Catherine's past, information that John Lascelles felt needed to be passed on to the King's Council. He had an audience with Archbishop Cranmer at Lambeth, and Cranmer then passed on the information to Thomas Audley, Lord Chancellor, and Edward Seymour, Earl of Hertford, who advised him that he needed to tell the king of Lascelles' claims. Hence the letter to the king on this day in 1541. But what exactly were these claims, and why did they cause such concern with the Archbishop and the Council? Well, a report from the King's Council to William Paget, the English ambassador in France, gives details about Lascelles' claims and this most miserable case lately revealed. Mary Hall had told her brother that Catherine is light both in living and conditions, i.e. that she had loose morals, and she told him that one Francis Dereham had lain in bed with her in his doublet and hose between the sheets 100 nights, and a maid in the house had said she would lie no longer with her because she knew not what matrimony was. Moreover, one Manox, a servant of the Duchess, knew a privy mark on her body. So this was put in a letter to Henry VIII, which Henry VIII was asked to read in private. The king was very much shocked, but he believed the matter forged. So he ordered a full investigation into Lascelles' claims. Lascelles and his sister Mary were to be examined by William Fitzwilliam, Earl of Southampton and Lord Privy Seal, while Thomas Risley, one of the King's principal secretaries, was to examine Henry Manox, Catherine's former music tutor, and to also apprehend Francis Dereham on a pretence of piracy. The king must have hoped that this was simply a storm in a teacup that would all blow over, that it was just tall tales and gossip. But unfortunately, Southampton and Risley were to bring him bad news. Southampton reported back that Lascelles and his sister stood by their story, and Risley reported back that Manox had confessed that he used to feel the secret parts of her body before Dereham was familiar with her, and that Dereham had confessed that he'd known her carnally many times, both in his doublet and hose between the sheets and in naked bed, alleging 3 women as witnesses. King Henry VIII was understandably heartbroken. It was recorded that, on learning this, the king's heart was pierced with pensiveness, so that it was long before he could utter his sorrow, and finally, with plenty of tears, which was strange in his courage, opened the same. The report goes on to say that Catherine was spoken to by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lord Chancellor, the Duke of Norfolk, the Lord Great Chamberlain, and the Bishop of Winchester, and she at first constantly denied it, but at last disclosed everything to the Archbishop of Canterbury, who took her confession in writing, subscribed by her hand. Then the rest of the witnesses, 8 or 9 men and women, were examined and agreed in one tale, so they all corroborated each other. Just over a month later, after it had come out that the Queen had also been having secret meetings with Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber, the King's grief had turned to anger and hatred. Charles de Marillac, the French ambassador, reported, "This king has changed his love for the Queen into hatred and taken such grief at being deceived that of late it was thought he'd gone mad, for he called for a sword to slay her he had loved so much. Sitting in council, he suddenly called for horses without saying where he would go. Sometimes he said irrelevantly that wicked woman had never such delight in her incontinency as she should have torture in her death. And finally he took to tears, regretting his ill luck in meeting with such ill-conditioned wives and blaming his council for this last mischief." So Henry VIII was very emotional. Francis Dereham and Thomas Culpeper were executed for treason at Tyburn on the 10th of December 1541, with Dereham suffering the full traitor's death of being hanged, drawn and quartered. Queen Catherine and her Lady Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, were executed by beheading at the Tower of London on the 13th of February 1542, and I'll give you a link to my talk on their execution from earlier in the year. So this day in Tudor history was the start of something really awful. King Henry VIII's happiness, his joy, his youth were just all taken away by these claims to do with his wife, and it was really the beginning of the end for Queen Catherine Howard. So sorry to leave you on a gloomy note there, but I hope the rest of your day is better. You can subscribe to this channel by clicking round about there. You can hit the bell to be notified, and you can of course give this video a like. I'd really appreciate that. I'll be back tomorrow with another On This Day event for you. See you then. Bye bye.